Thank you very much, Dr. Najam, for putting together this absolutely fascinating semicircle talk. Well, I'd like to begin by a brief biographical introduction as well. I don't really consider myself an academic. I'm a member of the Adjunct Faculty at the Law and Policy Department, but I wear other hats as well. I consider myself an environmental lawyer, so I'm a member of the Pakistan Environmental Lawyers Association, and through an accident of circumstance, I also find myself to be the chairman of the board of directors of the Lahore Electric Supply Company. So a lot of the things that Abu Bakr and Noman have talked about have resonated with me. I teach a course on environmental law and regulation at the law department. I've taught many courses. I've taught property law, which I consider to be the closest to my heart. But essentially, now I teach environmental law and regulation. And it's right, Dr. Najam came and gave a lecture on sustainable development. Apart from the Pakistan environmental law legislation, we talk about sustainable development. We try and talk about water. There's a component, several classes, we actually talk about water law, the Indus Water Treaty, how IRSA works, what the determinants of a water right in the irrigation system are. It's very fascinating. When water's in a river, it's under the doctrine of public trust, where the state has to regulate it for the benefit of everyone. When the water's in a canal, it's a common good to be regulated by the irrigation department, and once it passes the moha, it becomes a personal right. So it's very interesting how water actually changes its characteristics. But my interest in the environment actually stemmed from my involvement in a bit of activism here in Lahore. In a group called Lahore Bachao, and this was activism related to the Lahore Canal widening project. And so my interests have developed into an interest in sustainable urban development, energy, and water. And in addition, under the inspiration of Dr. Najam, climate change and sustainable development as well, primarily because my daughter has to live and breathe the air and drink the water in this country now and in the future. And that would be, for my personal reasons, what drives me very much so. At LUMS, during the environment course that I teach, I do two things. First, I cycle to campus. I live on Mall Road. It's no point trying to be an environmental activist or teaching an environmental law course when you burn hydrocarbons on your way here. I have driven here today, though. I have to point out. That's one thing. The second thing I do is I try and make it a paperless course. So all the readings are put onto PDF, scanned, and put onto a disk and distributed to the students. So there's no paper wasted in any of the class. Although, in my experience, this discourages the students from reading, fortunately. But maybe we could do something about that. A few years ago at LUMS, I had the great privilege of being the patron of the LUMS Environmental Action Forum. And at the time, there were several very interested students here at the time who spent time putting together a petition by students in support of cycle activism on campus. We took that petition to Babar Ali Saab, who very graciously twisted Pico's arm and got us a handful of cycles for the use of the group. The group then created a membership society, where you could pay to have access to the cycles, and had regulated the use of the cycles as well, which lasted. It was very successful. They raised 12,000 rupees in a month, so they could have the cycles repaired and so on and so forth. But once that batch graduated, the cycles fell into disrepair, and they're here somewhere in a shed gathering rust. But I mention this because if there's one thing I'd like to see LUMS do, would be to introduce some sort of cycle-friendly infrastructure. Because the lesson we learned from that particular experience was that obviously we need to have much more interface between faculty and students who will be regulating cycles, but there needs to be a lot more infrastructure in place on campus to make it cycle friendly. Removal of barriers, maybe cycle stands closer to the entrance of buildings, and this could be a way to get people involved in cycling. And you'll find that because of cycling, your other concerns about how the outside environment interacts with you will change. It's obviously hot in the summer, so if you're cycling anywhere, perhaps that's a reason to put trees down on that particular path, and so on and so forth. But that would be something that I would certainly like to work on, and I know several students who would also like to work on this as well. During my last class, environmental law class, the students put together for me a petition to be filed in the Lahore High Court on the pollution discharged into the River Ravi just in Lahore. I came across a staggering statistic that nearly 48% of all the effluent dumped into the Indus comes from the Ravi, which is the shortest river in Pakistan, which is insane. I mean, the health costs are just astronomical. Pakistan has the highest incidence of diarrhea deaths under 5. Most of the people who die in Pakistan die of cholera or typhoid. Most of the people in Pakistani hospitals are there because of waterborne diseases. It's an immense problem, and yet the province of Punjab has all of one sewage treatment plant, and that's in Faisalabad, and it doesn't work. Therefore, in Karachi, they don't work either. So it's quite staggering, this. But the petition has been filed by the research done by the students, and it's being filed on behalf of several organizations: the Public Interest Irrigation Association of Pakistan, the Pakistan Environmental Law Association, WWF Pakistan, the Lahore Conservation Society, and some others. So we hope to make this in the very near future. Actually, hopefully in the next week or 10 days, the Chief Justice of Pakistan has announced the creation of green benches in all of the high courts. So the petition's on hold until those benches are constituted, and we'll be able to file that petition. I'm very proud of the involvement and the passion shown by the students in the preparation of this case as well. I also am affiliated with the DPRC here at LUMS, and we've done one project and are working on another. I just want to briefly describe these two. The first was a very interesting transboundary water study that we did with an Indian NGO in New Delhi called ORF, and essentially this was mapping water practices in Indian Punjab and Pakistani Punjab before and after the Indus Water Treaty, and finding that despite our differences, we are incredibly similar. The project had its ups and downs, some pros and cons, but I think what I take from it is the immense importance of being able to establish academic ties in India that can talk about water-related issues outside the Indus Water Treaty framework. I think it's crucially important to develop these ties, not just basically because we're sharing a resource that's fast becoming very, very scarce. And the second thing I took from the project was the immense need to use water to discover commonalities between India and Pakistan, and to recognize, for instance, that there are chapters of the Mahabharata composed on the banks of the River Ravi on the Pakistani side of the border, and the number of Sufi saints and Sufiana Kalam that originates from the Indian side of the border, all of which comes from hydraulic civilization. These are songs and verses and cultures that base themselves on water practices and irrigation practices. And I think if you find these commonalities, you can make, and if you have contacts on the other side that can talk outside the Indus Water Treaty, you can make great strides in developing ties with India on issues such as water and the environment. The other project that we're doing is an IDRC project in conjunction or in partnership with WWF Pakistan, and this is in essence a study of how climate change is going to impact food security. It's a 3-year study of 10 districts in Punjab and Sindh in conjunction with WWF, where we look at Met Department data and how farmers are changing their practices in accordance with changing weather patterns. And here I share Dr. Najam's view that this may not be a long enough period of time to actually conduct a study like this, but at least it will give us some baseline information from which subsequent research can also be done. And lastly, I just wanted to touch upon, this is not something we're doing, but something I'd very much like to have done. Over at LESCO, we have a little bit of money from a World Bank loan dedicated for energy efficiency. And I am very, very keen, because I know that LESCO doesn't have the capacity right now in its research and development to have an effective energy efficiency cell or people working on energy efficient issues, not just technologically, but because I'm a lawyer, on other energy conservation issues such as building bylaws and the requirements of having better practices on energy conservation. I would like very much to see an interaction between LUMS and LESCO. I think it is in many ways, what's the word I'm looking for, symbiotic, that maybe even in the future the LESCO Energy Efficiency Cell could be parked here at LUMS and do research based on the sort of market needs and demands that we have, and to put good minds and good brains towards this. Thank you very much.